The oath takes about 4 seconds. I had watched people take it hundreds of times, in rooms with flags and rooms without them, and I had never once thought about how long it lasts until I watched my father-in-law raise his right hand in a county family courtroom and swear to tell the truth about me. He was 66 years old. He wore a gray suit that he had bought for his son's wedding, which was my wedding, and he had gotten it taken in since then because he had lost weight after his heart procedure. He looked like somebody's grandfather because he was. He was my son's. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth? I do, Russell Vance said. He lowered his hand and sat down and adjusted the microphone toward himself, the way a man does when he has practiced. Behind him, in the 2 rows on the petitioner's side, 11 members of my husband's family sat with their coats in their laps. I counted them while I waited. That is a habit. You count the room, you note the exits, you note who is watching whom, and you write it down later. 11 relatives, 4 of whom I had cooked Thanksgiving dinner for. Corey sat at the end of the 2nd row, my husband. He was looking at the floor between his shoes, and he did not look up once, not through any of it. His lawyer stood at the lectern and asked him to describe his relationship with his grandson. Isaac and I are close, Russell said. We're very close. He stays with us most weekends now. And his mother? Russell let a breath out through his nose. He did it slowly, and it played beautifully. It sounded like a man who did not want to be there. 3 years of deployments, Your Honor, he said. She's a stranger to that boy. I kept my hands flat on the table. That is not an accident. And it is not stoicism. It is training. 11 years in the military police corps teaches you that the first person to move in a hostile room is the person everybody remembers, and that being remembered is almost never what you want. So I put my palms down on the table in front of me, and I felt the cold of it, and I did not move them. Can you give the court an example? The lawyer asked. 2 Christmases missed, Russell said. Ask her. He said it, and then he turned his head slightly and smiled at his own attorney. It was a small smile. It was the smile of a man handing over a card he has been holding all night. I wrote nothing. I looked at the seal on the wall above the bench, and I counted the points on it, and I let the words go past me the way you let a vehicle go past a checkpoint when you have already radioed the plate ahead. The judge had been writing. I noticed when he stopped. He was a heavy-shouldered man in his late 50s with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, and he had spent the first hour of the morning making small, neat notes in a legal pad. Now his pen was down on the desk. He had turned back a page in the file in front of him, and he was reading something on it. The courtroom did not notice. Kirkbride was already moving to his next question, and Russell was already leaning toward the microphone. Mr. Vance, the judge said. Kirkbride stopped. Say that date again, please. Slowly. But let me back up a little. The papers came on a Tuesday in February, and Corey handed them to me across the kitchen island in our quarters at Fort Riley like he was passing me the mail. He had rehearsed it. I could tell because he started in the middle. I'm going to stay at my parents' place for a while, he said. It's not about Isaac. Nobody is saying anything about Isaac. The envelope had been opened already. He had opened it himself, read it, resealed nothing, and handed it to me folded in half, which is how I knew he had been carrying it around in his jacket for at least a day. Isaac was in the next room with the television on. He was 6 then. He had a cough that he was working very hard to hide from me because he had figured out that a cough meant no going to the fire station on Saturday. Okay, I said. Corey blinked at that. I think he had budgeted for a different conversation. That's it. You've clearly thought about it, I said. I'd rather you tell me what you decided than watch you decide it in front of me. I want to be fair to him, because in the end he did one thing that mattered, and because a story where everyone on the other side is a monster is not a story. It is a complaint. Corey Vance was not a cruel man. He was a man who had never once in his life been the strongest person in a room with his father in it, and he had made a career out of being agreeable in exactly the direction the pressure was coming from. He left that night. He took 2 bags and his good boots, and he told Isaac he was going to Grandpa's for a bit, and Isaac said okay, and asked whether he could come, and Corey said not this time, buddy, and that was the last honest sentence anyone in that family said to my son for 4 months. I want to tell you what I did after the door closed, because I think people expect a scene here. I did the dishes. Then I got a manila envelope out of the closet, and I wrote the date on the front of it, and I put the folded petition inside. That is not strength. I want to be clear about that. It is the only thing I know how to do when something large is coming at me. You start a file. You put the date on it. If somebody had asked me that night what I thought the file was for, I could not have told you. I only knew that in my experience, the people who lose are almost never the people who are wrong. They are the people who cannot prove when something happened. 6 months later, I was sitting in a corridor outside courtroom 4 during the morning recess, and my attorney was telling me that we were losing. Simone Bracco was a small, fast woman of about 44 who had done family law in that county for 19 years and who wore running shoes to court and changed into heels in the hallway. She had a way of delivering bad news that I appreciated, which was flatly and immediately, with no throat clearing. "Right now, that room believes him," she said. "I know. I want to make sure you understand why, because it isn't about you." She held up one finger. "The standard here is not truth. It's the best interest of the child. A judge is allowed to find that a man is exaggerating and still find that his grandson is better off with more stability than you can offer. Those two findings do not contradict each other. So we lose, even if he's lying." "You can lose, even if he's lying," she said. "Yes." I looked down the corridor. Through the glass doors at the end, I could see the parking lot and a strip of very flat Kansas sky. "But," Simone said, and she put the finger down, "he did something this morning that I have been waiting 9 weeks for somebody on that side to do. He gave dates." "He gave dates." She almost smiled. "He is not lying about your character, Meredith. Character is unfalsifiable. He is lying about dates. Dates we can check. Here's the thing about my father-in-law that I need you to understand, because otherwise the rest of this will sound like a man being stupid, and he was not stupid. Russell Vance had spent 41 years selling agricultural equipment across 4 states. He was extremely good at it. He had a memory for names that I have only otherwise seen in senior non-commissioned officers, and he had the specific gift that all great salesmen have, which is that he could make a fact feel warm. He did not argue with you. He agreed with you at length in a way that left you holding a position you had not started with. The first phone call came in March, 3 weeks after Corey moved out. "I'm not calling to get in the middle," he said. "Okay. I want you to know that Loretta and I are not taking sides. That boy has 2 parents, and whatever happens between the 2 of you happens between the 2 of you." A pause, exactly the right length. "I just want to say one thing, and then I'll leave it. Go ahead. He's 7 in November. 7 is when they start to remember things properly." Another pause. "What if he's stabilized with us? Just while you sort yourself out. School district's good here. Loretta's home all day." I said I would think about it. Then I hung up the phone and I wrote on the back of an envelope. R. Vance called. 14th of March, 7:42 p.m. Proposed Isaac reside with them while you sort yourself out. No mention of a filing. I want to be honest about why I wrote that down. It was not because I was clever. It was because I have interviewed several hundred people in my career, and I have learned that the difference between a bad feeling and evidence is about 9 seconds and a pen. He filed the petition in May. Grandparent custody modification. In the state of Kansas, a grandparent can seek custody, and the bar is high, and the way you clear a high bar is that you make the other parent look like a stranger. He was good on the stand. I need to say that plainly because I have heard a lot of people describe their family's villain as obviously monstrous, and that was not my experience of the morning. Kirkbride, his attorney, was a heavy man of about 52 with a good suit and a habit of resting one hand on the lectern like it was a fence post. He did not push Russell. He let him talk. "Mr. Vance, why are you here today?" Russell took his time. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said. "I want the court to hear me say that. I don't have anything against Meredith. She's had a hard road." He looked at his hands. "I'm here because that boy asked me why his mother sends packages instead of coming home." I felt that one. I am not going to pretend that I did not. It was not true. Isaac had never said it, and I knew he had never said it, because Isaac at that point had been asked to say a great many things by a great many adults and had responded to all of it by talking about fire trucks. But it was the kind of sentence that does not need to be true to work. It only needs to be sayable. Behind me, somebody made a small sound. One of the aunts. "Can you tell the court about the deployments?" Kirkbride said. "There were 2 big ones," Russell said. 2023 and 2024. 9 months, then 9 months. I'm not criticizing that. That's her job. I understand that's her job. "How did that affect your grandson?" "He stopped asking," Russell said. Then he did the thing that ended his own case, although nobody in the room knew it yet, including me, for about another 90 seconds. "I'll tell you exactly what it was like," he said. "Christmas Eve, 2023, we're at the table. There's a place set. Nobody's in it. He shook his head slowly. Christmas Day, 2024. Same thing. Not 1 hour. Not 1 hour either year. Kirkbride let it sit. Not 1 hour, he repeated. Not 1 hour, Russell said. I picked up my pen for the first time that morning. I wrote 2 things on the legal pad in front of me. 24 DEC 2023. 25 DEC 2/24. I underlined them once, and I want to tell you what I felt, because it was not triumph. It was something colder and much more familiar than that. It was the feeling you get at a traffic control point when a driver volunteers information nobody asked him for. He had given me the 2 things that a military police officer is trained above all else to want: a date and a time. I slid the pad 6 inches to my left. Simone read it without turning her head. She did not look up, and she did not write anything back, and after a moment she reached over and put her hand flat on the pad and left it there. Kirkbride kept him up there another 40 minutes, and I am going to skip most of it, because most of it was true. That is the part nobody warns you about. The strongest thing a liar can do is tell you 9 true things and 1 false one, and let you spend your energy on the 9. It was true that I had been gone 9 months in 2023. It was true that I had missed Isaac's 5th birthday. It was true that in the spring of 2025, I had missed a parent-teacher conference because of a range incident that kept me on the installation until 9 at night. And it was true that Loretta had gone in my place. And it was true that Isaac had been glad to see her. I sat there and let all of it be true, and I thought about the fact that a life can be assembled entirely out of accurate facts into a shape that has never existed. Let me tell you about December of 2023. Since it came up, we flew back from Kuwait into Fort Riley on the 19th, 9 months and 11 days. The flight was delayed twice at Shannon and then again in Bangor, and by the time we came down over Kansas, the whole aircraft had gone quiet in the way that units go quiet at the end, when everybody has run out of the energy it takes to pretend to be casual. Isaac was 4. He was standing on the hangar floor in a fire truck sweatshirt that was already too small for him, holding Corey's hand, and when he saw me, he did not run. That is the part they never show you. He looked at me, and then he looked up at his father to check whether it was allowed. Corey said, "Oh, go on, bud." That was a good thing that Corey did. I want that in the record, too. Christmas Eve, 5 days later, I made a ham because that is what my mother made. And I did it badly, and Loretta rescued the glaze without saying anything about it, which was her particular kindness, and always had been. We ate at 4 in the afternoon because Isaac could not wait. Russell sat at the end of the table in the chair he always took, and he carved, because carving was his, and he told a long story about a combine auction in Salina that everybody had heard before. At some point that evening, he stood behind my chair and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Glad you're home, kiddo." I have thought about that sentence a great deal since. I do not believe he was lying when he said it. That is what I have landed on. I think he meant it entirely. And I think 2.5 years later, he sat in a courtroom and swore that the evening had not happened. And I think both of those things were true of the same man. And that is the part I have not fully made peace with. December of 2024 was thinner. I came back in November that time, and the reunion was easier and smaller, and the marriage was already going. You can feel it in the house before anybody says it. Corey had taken a civilian job in Manhattan, 20 minutes off post, and he was gone a lot. And when he was home, he was on his phone, in the way that people are on their phones when they are talking to somebody who makes them feel uncomplicated. Christmas Day. We did presents in the morning at our place. Russell and Loretta drove up from Wichita. They came through the gate a little after 11, and Russell complained about the line, and Loretta had brought a coffee cake in a tin with a rubber band around it. Isaac was 5. He got a die-cast ladder truck with a working ladder, and he took it apart within the hour, and Russell sat on the floor with him and put it back together, and I took a photograph of the 2 of them from the kitchen doorway because they did not know I was there. Not 1 hour, he said. Either year. The morning went on. Kirkbride sat down at 11:40, and the judge asked whether we wished to begin cross-examination before the recess, and Simone said she would prefer to start after, and the judge said that was sensible, and then he did not call the recess. He sat back instead, and he took his glasses off, and he held them by one arm and looked at them for a second, like he was deciding something. "Before we break," he said, "I need to put something on the record." Kirkbride half stood, the way lawyers do when they are not sure yet whether they should be worried. "Your Honor." "Sit down, counselor. You haven't done anything." Kirkbride sat. The judge's name was Alden Prosser. I had read his name on the docket sheet 9 weeks earlier, and it had meant nothing to me, and I want to be clear about that. Because I have been asked since then whether I knew, and I did not know. There are a great many judges in Kansas, and a great many of them are veterans. It is the most ordinary thing in the world. I've been sitting here for 2 hours with a service file in front of me, Judge Prosser said, and about 20 minutes ago, I worked out why I recognized a name in it, and the rules require me to say so out loud in front of everybody rather than sit on it. The courtroom had gone completely still. Not dramatic, administrative, the specific stillness of a room where something procedural is happening that nobody has been briefed on. I served 22 years in the Army Reserve as a judge advocate, he said. Part of that time, I sat as a military judge. I retired as a colonel in 2021. He put his glasses back on and looked directly at me for the first time all morning. We've met, Major. 2019. You were the investigating officer, and you were on the stand for 6 hours. I didn't say anything. You do not answer a judge who has not asked you a question. But I remembered. It came back the way things do, all at once and out of order. A cold courtroom at Fort Hood. A defense counsel who kept asking me the same question 4 different ways to see whether the answer would move. 6 hours and 11 minutes, because I had looked at my watch when it ended. A colonel behind the bench who had let the defense run and had then asked me 2 questions of his own at the very end, both of them about chain of custody, both of them exactly the right questions. I want to be precise about the nature of the contact, Prosser said, because the parties are entitled to it. I have never met Major Vance socially. I have no knowledge of her personal life, her marriage, or her son. I have never spoken to her outside of a courtroom. What I have is a professional recollection of her testimony in an unrelated criminal matter 7 years ago. He turned to Kirkbride. Counselor, that is a disclosure, not a disqualification. But you are entitled to move for my recusal, and if you do, I will grant it, and this matter will be reassigned and reset, probably into the winter. Do you wish to be heard? I have replayed the next 11 seconds more times than I would like to admit. Kirkbride looked at his client. Russell looked back at him. And I watched something pass between those 2 men that I have seen 100 times in interview rooms, which is 2 people silently agreeing that flinching would look worse than whatever the alternative is. Because here is what it would have cost him. If Kirkbride asks for recusal, he tells 11 relatives in the 2 rows behind him that his case cannot survive a judge who has met me. He tells them that the mother they have driven 4 hours to help remove from her child's life is somebody whose mere professional reputation is a threat. He would have had to walk back to that table and be a man who blinked. Kirkbride stood up and buttoned his jacket. No objection, Your Honor, he said. We're comfortable. You're certain? Quite certain. My client has nothing to hide from anyone who's read a service file. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, because I have. Judge Prosser looked at him for slightly longer than was comfortable. Then I'll note for the record that this court knows how to read a service file, he said. And I intend to. He picked up his pen. We'll break until 1 o'clock. Behind me, for the first time in 2 hours, I heard Corey shift in his seat. There is a bench outside courtroom 4, bolted to the wall, and Simone and I sat on it and ate sandwiches out of a paper bag she had brought from home, and I explained to her what a visitor control center is. Walk me through it like I'm slow, she said. Fort Riley is a controlled installation, I said. That means access is controlled. You cannot drive onto it because you feel like it. If you have a Department of Defense identification card, you scan it at the gate. If you do not have one, you are a visitor, and a visitor has to be sponsored. Sponsored by somebody with a card. Somebody who is authorized to be there. That person is the escort. Simone stopped chewing. So somebody has to sign him on. Somebody has to sign him on, I said. He goes to the visitor control center, or he uses the trusted traveler lane with his sponsor in the vehicle. In either way, he presents identification, and either way, the system creates a record. Name, date of birth, date, time, gate, sponsor. Meredith. I know. Meredith, look at me. How many times has that man been on your installation? Dozens, I said. He came for Isaac's birthdays. He came for the change of command in 2022. He came for 2 Christmases. Simone put the sandwich down on the paper bag very slowly, the way you put down something you have realized is fragile. He drove onto my installation to see his grandson, I said. He signed his own name at the gate, every single time. I want to explain why this had not occurred to me sooner, because it is the question I have been asked most often since. The answer is that it had not occurred to me because for 9 weeks I had been defending my character. When someone accuses you of being a stranger to your child, every instinct you have goes toward proving that you are not, and the way people try to prove that is with feeling. You want to bring in photographs of birthdays. You want to bring in teachers. You want to stand up and describe the specific noise your son makes when he is pretending to be asleep. None of it is evidence. All of it is argument. It took my father-in-law standing up under oath and saying 2 dates out loud in a room where saying things has consequences to turn the case from a question about what kind of mother I am into a question about what happened on the 24th of December. And a question about what happened on a specific date at a specific gate is not a question about me at all. It is a question about a database. How long to certify? Simone said. If I call the Provost Marshal's office myself, I said, before you finish your sandwich. She did not finish her sandwich. I made the call from the stairwell at 12:19. The Provost Marshal's office at Fort Riley is not a mysterious place. It is a building with bad coffee and a printer that jams, and the woman who runs records for the access control system is a master sergeant named Yolanda Priest, and I had known her for 4 years. Ma'am, she said, you're supposed to be in court. I am in court. Yolanda, I need certified access control records for a named visitor. There was a pause of about 2 seconds, which is what it sounds like when a senior non-commissioned officer stops what she is doing and picks up a pen. Give me the name. Vance, Russell Dean. Date of birth is in the file I am about to send you. Another pause, longer. Ma'am, she said carefully, is that your father-in-law? Yes. Do you want me to pull the whole history or specific dates? Pull the whole history, I said. But I need 2 dates first, 24 December 2023, 25 December 2024. I heard her typing. I heard her stop typing. How fast do you need this certified? Simone Bracco is going to send you a subpoena in about 9 minutes, I said. How fast can you have it stamped and signed by the custodian? I am the custodian, Master Sergeant Priest said. Ma'am, I have got to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as a professional courtesy and not as a friend. If these records say what you think they say, I am not the one who should be walking them into a courtroom for you. You need them coming through the system with a certification and a custodian who can testify, or the other side is going to say his daughter-in-law, the military police officer, pulled her own evidence. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the stairwell wall. She was right. She was completely right, and I had been 30 seconds from making the single worst mistake available to me. Then I need you to do it properly, I said, and I need you to be prepared to come and say so under oath. Yes, ma'am, she said. I'll want the subpoena, and ma'am, I've got a daughter. Loretta found me by the water fountain at 10 minutes to 1. I had not spoken to my mother-in-law since April. She had sent a card at Easter with a $20 bill in it for Isaac and no note, and I had put it in the manila envelope with everything else, because by then I had learned to put everything in the envelope. She looked terrible. She had aged in a way that 4 months does not usually account for, and she was holding her phone against her chest with both hands like a hymnal. Meredith. Loretta. I need you to know that I didn't know he was going to say that. Her chin went, and she got it back under control. About the Christmases, I didn't know he was going to say that. I did not say anything. That is a technique, and I am not proud of using it on a 63-year-old woman by a water fountain, but I used it. She held the phone out. He carved the ham, she said. In your kitchen. He carved the ham both years, Meredith, and I've got the pictures because I take pictures of everything. Corey says it's a sickness. I did not take the phone. Loretta, I want you to listen to me carefully because I am about to give you advice against my own interest, I said. If you show me those photographs right now and I use them, the first thing their lawyer will say is that I got them from you. If you want them to matter, you have to give them to somebody else. Who? His name is Kirkbride, I said, and he is your husband's attorney, and he has an obligation you would not believe. Or you tell my attorney and she does it the right way. Those are the 2 doors. She looked at the phone in her hand. I've been married 41 years, she said. I know. He isn't a wicked man. I don't think he is either, I said, and I meant it, and it is still the strangest true thing I have ever said out loud. I think he decided he was rescuing somebody, and I think once he decided that, every other thing became a detail. Loretta Vance stood by a water fountain in a county courthouse and cried without making any noise at all, which is a thing I have only ever seen women of her generation do. Then she walked down the corridor to where Simone was standing, and she handed my attorney her telephone. Court came back in at 7 minutes past 1. The certified records did not arrive until 2:40. I need to be honest about that gap because in every version of this story I have told since, I have been tempted to compress it. And the truth is that it was 93 minutes of sitting in a wooden chair, not knowing. Simone cross-examined Russell for most of it, and she did it in a way that I found almost unbearable at the time and have come to regard as the finest piece of professional work I have ever watched. She was gentle with him. She did not attack the Christmases. She barely touched them. She asked him about the drive from Wichita and whether he took the turnpike or the back way. She asked him how long it took. She asked him whether the traffic was worse at the gate on holidays. "It can back up," Russell said. "Sure." "How long would you say?" 20 minutes, half an hour on a bad day. "And that's at the gate." "That's at the gate." "Mr. Vance," Simone said, "when you visit an Army installation, do they check your identification?" Kirkbride said, "Objection, relevance." "Goes to the witness's familiarity with the base, Your Honor." "Overruled. Answer it." Russell shrugged. "They check everybody." "Every time." "Every time." "Thank you," Simone said, and sat down. I watched Kirkbride write something on his pad and underline it. I do not know what it said. I have wondered. At 2:40, the clerk came in through the side door with a sealed envelope and a transmittal sheet, and Simone stood up and asked the court's leave to introduce certified business records from the Directorate of Emergency Services, Fort Riley, Kansas, along with the custodian who was at that moment sitting in the corridor in a service uniform. Kirkbride objected on notice. He was entitled to. The judge gave him 30 minutes to review the documents. 30 minutes is not very long. I want to tell you that it is, because it would make a better story and because that is what it felt like. But it is 30 minutes. What is long is what you do inside it, which in my case was sit on a bench in a corridor and look at a fire alarm on the opposite wall and think about the fact that a 7-year-old boy's address was going to be decided by whether a computer at a gatehouse had been working properly on Christmas Eve. Simone sat down next to me at minute 22. "Whatever happens," she said, "you did this correctly. You did not touch the evidence. You had it certified. You brought a custodian." "I know. I need you to hear me say it now, because if it goes badly, you will not be able to hear it later." Master Sergeant Yolanda Priest walked into courtroom 4 at 3:14 in the afternoon in Army service uniform, took the oath, spelled her name for the record, and proceeded to give the least dramatic testimony I have ever heard in my life. That was the point. That was the entire point. "Master Sergeant, what is your position?" "I'm the records custodian for the Installation Access Control System at Fort Riley, ma'am." "What does that system do?" "It controls and records physical access to the installation." "Can you explain how a visitor gets on?" "Yes, ma'am. A visitor without a Department of Defense credential presents a government photo identification at the Visitor Control Center. We run a background vetting check. If they pass, we issue a visitor pass tied to a sponsor. At the gate, the pass is scanned and the entry is logged." "What does the log record?" "Name, date of birth, pass number, sponsor, gate, date, and time of entry." "Is it automatic?" "The scan is automatic, ma'am. The system doesn't know who anybody is. It knows who signed." I have thought about that sentence more than almost anything else that was said in that room. The system does not know who anybody is. It does not know that Russell Vance carved a ham. It does not know that he sat on a floor and reassembled a ladder truck for a 5-year-old. It does not know that he is warm or persuasive or that 11 people drove 4 hours to sit behind him. It knows that at a specific minute, a specific credential was presented at a specific gate, and it wrote that down, and it has no opinion about any of it. That is what evidence is. It is the part of the world that does not care how you come across. Master Sergeant, I'm handing you what has been marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 1 and 2, and I'd ask you to identify them. These are certified access control records for a named individual. Which individual? Vance, Russell Dean. Somebody in the second row said something. The judge looked up once and it stopped. Would you read the first entry, please? Master Sergeant Priest put on a pair of reading glasses, which I had never once seen her wear in 4 years. 24 December 2023, Henry Gate. Entry logged at 16:41 hours. Sponsor listed as Vance Meredith A., Major, United States Army. And the second, 25 December 2024, Trooper Gate. Entry logged at 11:09 hours. Same sponsor. Simone did not pause for effect. I want to say that because a lesser attorney would have, and it would have ruined it. How many total entries are in the complete record for this individual? Between January 2022 and February 2026, there are 31. 31! Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Nothing further. Kirkbride's cross-examination lasted 4 questions. I timed it because I had started timing things at some point that afternoon without deciding to. Master Sergeant, can a computer system be wrong? Yes, sir. So these records could be wrong. They could be, sir. Thank you. Sir, may I finish the answer? The judge said. You may. They could be wrong, Master Sergeant Priest said. In this case, the individual presented a government photo identification, was vetted, was issued a pass, and was scanned through a manned gate by a soldier who checks the photograph against the face. That's 2 independent verifications and a badge photo. I've been the custodian for 6 years, ma'am and sir, and I've never had one of those be wrong. Kirkbride sat down. I looked at my father-in-law then, for the first time since the morning. He was not looking at the exhibits. He was looking at his own hands on the rail in front of the witness box, and he was turning his wedding ring around with his thumb, which is a thing I had watched him do at every family dinner for 10 years without ever once thinking about it. Behind him, 2 of the 11 had stopped looking at the front of the room and had started looking at each other. Corey asked to be heard at 4 o'clock. He did it badly. He stood up in the second row while Kirkbride was speaking, which you are not supposed to do, and the bailiff started toward him. And Corey said, I want to say something, in a voice that came out much too loud. Judge Prosser looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Vance, you are not a party to this petition. You are a parent in a related matter, and you are represented. Do you understand that anything you say from that box is under oath and can be used against you in your own case? Yes, sir. Does your counsel wish to be heard? Corey's lawyer, a tired man who had said almost nothing all day, stood up and said, I've advised my client against this, Your Honor. Noted. Mr. Vance, come forward. He was sworn. He sat down. He put his phone on the rail in front of him and then picked it up again and held it in both hands. Mr. Vance, Simone said, what did you want to tell the court? I sent my dad a message, Corey said. Last night. Do you have it? Yes. Would you read it, please, out loud? He looked at me then. It was the first time all day, and I want to be careful about how I describe it, because I have been asked whether it was an apology, and it was not. It was something smaller and more useful than that. It was a man who had run out of ways to be agreeable in every direction at once. He read it. Just say the number, don't say the years. The courtroom was very quiet. What did you mean by that? Simone asked. He was practicing, Corey said, at the kitchen table. He kept saying, she was gone 2 Christmases, she was gone 2 Christmases, and I said, Dad, she wasn't. She was home both times you were there, and he said the number sounds worse. And I said, fine, but don't say the years out loud because somebody's going to check the years. And what did he say to that? Corey looked down at the phone. He said nobody checks. Judge Alden Prosser ruled from the bench at 4:40 in the afternoon, which Simone told me afterward she had never seen him do in 11 years of practice in front of him. He read the findings out in the flat, unhurried way of a man who has written a great many of them. The petition for grandparent custody modification was denied. The court found that the petitioner had failed to establish the statutory threshold by any margin whatsoever. The court further found, and he slowed here, that the petitioner's sworn testimony as to the dates of 24 December 2023 and 25 December 2024 was materially false, that the falsity was not a matter of faulty recollection, and that the testimony had been offered with knowledge of its falsity based on the contemporaneous statement of a witness. The matter was referred to the district attorney for the county. Then he took his glasses off and spoke to my father-in-law directly, and this is the only part of the ruling I could repeat from memory the same night. Mr. Vance, I want to say one thing to you that is not in my findings. You did not lose this case because a judge recognized a name. You lost it because you swore to a specific hour. Every witness who lies eventually has to choose between being vague and being convincing, and you chose convincing because you have spent your life being convincing and it has always worked. The gate you drove through disagrees with you. It has no interest in this family. It wrote down what happened at 4:41 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve, and then it forgot about all of you, and it will be there next year, and it will not care then either. Kirkbride stood and asked the court to consider his client's age, his health, and his intentions before the referral was made. Judge Prosser turned to our table. Major Vance, the referral is mine to make, and I am making it. But this court will hear you on the question of your father-in-law's exposure, if you wish to be heard. Simone put her hand on my forearm. She told me later that she did it because she had watched 200 clients be handed that particular microphone, and she had watched almost all of them take it. I stood up. I want to tell you that what I felt in that moment was mercy. It was not. What I felt was a very clear, very cold understanding that there was nothing available to me in that room that I wanted. I had come for one thing. Your Honor, I said, this was never about winning. I just needed the record to be right. Nothing further? Nothing further, Your Honor. I sat down. I did not look at Russell Vance when I left the courtroom. I have examined that decision many times since, and I have never been able to decide whether it was grace or cowardice, and I have come to suspect that at a certain point those two things become difficult to tell apart from the inside. I want to tell you about the drive home, because everything I had prepared myself for turned out to be about the courtroom, and nobody prepares you for the parking lot. It was still light out. That surprised me. I had been in that building since 8 in the morning, and some part of me had assumed that when it ended it would be night, the way it is in the version of this you imagined beforehand. Simone walked me out. At the car she said, "You will feel worse tomorrow than you do right now, and that is normal, and it is not a sign that anything went wrong." She was right about that too. Isaac was at Tova Bergstrom's house. Tova is a fellow officer and my closest friend on that installation, and she had taken him for the day and had asked me exactly nothing about it for 9 weeks, which is a form of friendship I did not know existed until I needed it. When I came in, he was lying on her living room floor with a coloring book, and he looked up and said, "Did you win?" I had thought about that question for weeks. I had a whole answer built for it. "Yes," I said. "Okay," he said, and went back to the coloring book. "That is what 7 is. That is the whole of it. The thing you have been carrying around in your chest for 6 months turns out to weigh about 4 ounces to the person you were carrying it for, and you should be grateful for that. And you are. And it still knocks the wind out of you a little." The call from the district attorney's office came 11 days later. A woman named Nora Whitfield had been the guardian ad litem in the case, and it was actually her office that called first to tell me that her recommendation stood and the file was closing on her end. Then the county called about the referral. I want to be careful here, because I have heard people tell this kind of story as though a referral is a conviction, and it is not. What happened is that a prosecutor in a county with a great many things to do looked at a file involving a 66-year-old man with no criminal history and a documented cardiac condition and offered him a diversion agreement. He would acknowledge the false statements in writing. He would complete a period of supervision. If he complied, the charge would not be filed. Simone called to tell me and asked whether I wanted to be heard on it. "No," I said. "You are entitled to submit a statement." "I know." "Meredith." "I have thought about it," I said. "And here is where I have landed. If I write that letter, I am doing it for me, and I would be spending my son's grandfather to do it, and I already spent his grandfather once, and I did not enjoy it. He signed the agreement in October. I have never read it. It is a public document, and I could read it any time I want, and I have chosen so far not to. The family did what families do, which is split in a way that made no sense. 2 of the 11 called me. One of them was an aunt I had never particularly liked, who left a voicemail that said, in its entirety, "I was in that room, and I'm ashamed of it, and you don't have to call me back." She was right that I did not call her back. I have kept the voicemail. 4 of them stopped speaking to Loretta on the theory that she had betrayed her husband. 3 stopped speaking to Corey. Nobody stopped speaking to Russell, which I found clarifying. Corey moved into an apartment in Manhattan in September. He is on time now. That is the thing I keep coming back to when people ask me whether we are all right, because we are not all right, and we are not going to be. And I no longer think that is the relevant question. He picks Isaac up at 4 o'clock on Wednesdays, and he is there at 4 o'clock. He has been there at 4 o'clock for every Wednesday since the 2nd week of September. That is not forgiveness. I want to be honest that I have not forgiven him, and I am not certain that I am working on it. But a 7-year-old does not experience forgiveness. A 7-year-old experiences a truck in the parking lot at 4 o'clock, and he experiences it as love, and he is not wrong. Loretta and I meet at a diner off the highway on the first Saturday of the month. The first time in October, I sat in the car with the window down for the whole 45 minutes, because I did not trust myself to be in the building, and I did not trust the arrangement enough to leave. She sat in the booth with Isaac and let him tell her about fire trucks. She had brought a coffee cake in a tin with a rubber band around it, which I did not comment on and could barely look at. When she brought him out, she stood by the driver's door. "He won't say your name in the house," she said. "Then we'll keep meeting here," I said. She nodded. She did not argue, and she did not apologize on his behalf, and I have come to think of that as the most respectful thing available to her. Meredith, can I ask you something? Yes. Are you going to let this stop? I looked through the windshield at the highway. No, I said. Not on my side. That is the boundary. It is not generous and it is not cruel. It is a diner on the first Saturday for 45 minutes, and it holds because it is small enough to hold. Isaac asked in November. He asked at the kitchen table with a piece of toast in his hand, in the flat, sideways way that children ask the enormous questions, which is always while doing something else and never when you are ready. How come Grandpa Russell doesn't come anymore? I had prepared for this too. I had a version that was about how adults sometimes disagree, and I had a version that was about how people can love you and still make mistakes. And I stood at the counter with a dish towel in my hand, and I discarded both of them, because he was going to be 8 in a week and because he is going to be 40 someday. And remember what I said. He said something in a room where you are only allowed to say true things, I said. It wasn't true, and it was about me, and it was serious. So now he has to fix that with the room. Isaac thought about it. Not with us? Not with us, I said. Not first. Is he in trouble? A little bit. It's grown-up trouble. It isn't the kind you go to jail for. Did you make him be in trouble? I want to tell you that I had an answer ready for that. I did not. No, I said eventually. He did that. But I'm the one who showed the room, and I would do it again, and I want you to know that both of those things are true at the same time. He nodded and ate his toast and asked whether we could go to the fire station. Here's what I want to say about that conversation, and it is the reason I agreed to tell this story at all. I won. The record is right. My son lives with me, and no one is going to take him, and every part of that is because I sat still with my hands flat on a table while a man lied about me, and then produced a piece of paper that he himself had generated, and my son lost his grandfather. He did not lose a monster. He lost a man who reassembled a ladder truck on a living room floor, and who carved the ham, and who called him kiddo, and who then decided that a boy was better off without his mother and swore to it. Both of those are the same person. Nobody in that courtroom said so out loud, because courtrooms are not built to say that. And I have decided that if I am going to tell this at all, I am going to be the one who says it. I did not get to choose only one of those outcomes. That is not how it works. You do not get to keep your child and also keep the family that came for your child. You are handed both results in the same envelope, and you carry them both, and anybody who tells you that winning felt clean is telling you a story with the cost edited out. The following spring, I was selected for a provost marshal billet. I found out in the least ceremonial way possible, which is how these things actually happen. I was standing in the parking lot outside the commissary with a cart full of groceries, and my phone rang, and a colonel I had worked for in 2022 said, "Congratulations, you're going to hate it," and hung up. I sat in the truck for a while before I started it. I have been asked whether the case hurt my career, and the honest answer is that I do not know and I never will, because that is not a thing anybody writes down. What I do know is that a county judge, who used to sit as a military judge, made a set of findings about the reliability of my service record in a public document, and that document exists, and it is not the document my father-in-law intended to create when he filed. There is a specific irony there that took me about 6 months to be able to enjoy. Part of the new job is the Visitor Control Center. I had been in that building perhaps 40 times over 4 years, and I had never once stood behind the counter during a holiday rush, and in the December after the hearing I did, because we were short and because I wanted to. It is not glamorous. It is the linoleum room with a rope line and a photograph printer that runs out of ribbon at the worst possible moment. On the 23rd of December, it was full of grandparents. That is who comes on the 23rd. Not soldiers. Grandparents in Christmas sweaters with tins. I watched a specialist about 22 years old walk an elderly couple through the process. Photo identification, vetting check, pass printed, sponsor confirmed, which was a young sergeant standing there with her hands in her pockets looking embarrassed, the way you do when your parents are being processed. The old man made a joke about needing a security clearance to see his own granddaughter. Everybody laughed, including the specialist, who has heard it 400 times. And the system wrote it down. It wrote down his name and the time, 1612, and the gate, and who signed for him, and then it forgot about all of them, exactly as Judge Prosser said it would. I stood behind that counter for 3 hours, and I thought about the fact that every single one of those people was, at that moment, generating a permanent record of their own love. Proof that they came. Proof of the date and the hour. None of them knew it, and none of them will ever need it, and one day, one of them might, and it will be there. That is the closest thing to a moral I have found in any of this, and it is not the one I expected to find. Isaac turned 8 in November and had his party at the fire station, because of course he did. Loretta came. It was the first time she had been on the installation since the hearing, and I sponsored her myself, and I stood at the visitor control center and gave my name as the escort and watched the specialist type it in. Vance, Loretta J. Sponsor, Vance, Meredith A., Major, United States Army. She saw me looking at the screen. "Is that the thing?" she said quietly. "Is that what it was?" "That's the thing." She looked at it for a moment. "It's very small," she said. "Yes," I said. "That's what makes it work." She stayed 2 hours. She sat on a bench in the apparatus bay with a paper plate on her knees and let 11 8-year-olds explain a fire truck to her. And when she left, she hugged Isaac, and then she stopped in front of me and did not try to hug me, which I appreciated more than I can tell you. Russell did not come. Nobody suggested that he should. A letter arrived in February, a year after the papers. It was 3 pages, handwritten, and it came to my quarters, which meant somebody had given him the address, and I have decided not to find out who. I read it once, standing at the kitchen counter with my coat still on. It was not an apology, although it used the word twice. It was a letter about intentions. It explained at length and quite movingly what he had believed he was doing and why, and it described his own father, and it described a hospital waiting room in 2021, and it asked, in the last paragraph, whether there was a road back. I want to be honest about my reaction, because the version of me that people expect would have been moved. What I felt was that it was a very good letter. 41 years of selling agricultural equipment across 4 states will teach a man to write a very good letter. That is not the same as saying it was untrue. I think most of it was true. I think a man can be sincere on paper in February about a thing he swore to in August, and I think the sincerity does not repair the swearing, and I think he still does not entirely understand that the problem was never that he hurt my feelings. The problem was that he stood up in a room built for one purpose and used it as a tool. I put the letter in the manila envelope. I have not answered it. I may answer it. Isaac is going to be 9, and then 12, and then 20. And at some point, that boy is going to want to make his own decision about a man who carved the ham. And when that day comes, I intend to hand him the whole envelope and let him read all of it. The petition and the transcript and the gate logs and the letter, and make up his own mind with the complete record in front of him. That is the only inheritance I have that I am certain is worth passing on. If my story has taught you anything, let it be this. Tell the truth to the institutions that keep records, and write down the date. Not because the world is fair, because it is not, and not because being right protects you, because it does not. Do it because the day may come when somebody you loved stands up in a room and describes a version of you that never existed, and on that day, the only thing standing between you and that version is whether some quiet, uninterested system somewhere wrote down what actually happened and whether you can find it. Character is unfalsifiable. That is what my attorney told me on a bench outside a courtroom, and it cuts both ways. Nobody can prove you are a good mother, but anybody can prove where you were at 4:41 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. And sometimes that is enough, and sometimes it is everything. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There is somebody in your life being quietly rewritten by a person who is very good at talking, and they may not know yet that the record is on their side. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to prove something that should never have needed proving? I read them. I read all of them. If you want more stories about courage, justice, and hope, subscribe and stay with us. There are more of them than you would think, and most of them are not about winning. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to the end of it, and for caring about a woman who kept her hands flat on a table, and about a 7-year-old boy who only ever wanted to see the fire trucks. The end.